You believed giving meant loss. What if giving proves what you already have? Jesus starts with common ground. He doesn't begin with mystery. He begins with something no one argues with. You cannot give what you do not have. Case established. Nobody objects. Then he quietly shifts the investigation. The question is no longer, did you possess it? The question becomes, what does giving prove? The world says giving proves loss. Truth says giving proves possession. That is where the investigation begins. Jesus comes through the back door. Instead of demanding belief, he says, in effect, you don't believe me? Fine, let's follow the evidence. If what I'm saying is false, the evidence won't support it. But if the evidence consistently points to the same conclusion, what does Detective Boy do? He follows the evidence. The miracle isn't something you're asked to believe beforehand. The miracle is the evidence that changes the verdict. That's Detective Boy. No pressure, no persuasion, just investigation. Ideas obey different laws than objects. A ball changes owners. An idea doesn't. Teach peace. You become more aware of peace. The disagreement is over value. Then Jesus asks a deeper question. Not, what do you possess, but what do you value? The world protects value by hiding it. Truth protects value by extending it. That's why he says, protect all things you value by giving them away. Immediately afterward, he explains why. Because value lies not in form. Nothing physical was ever the treasure. The thought was. Teach forgiveness. Forgiveness becomes stronger in your own awareness. Bless. You recognize blessing. Ideas extend. They aren't transferred. Form points. It never contains. The restaurant wasn't the treasure. The kindness was. The body isn't the treasure. The life it points toward is. The lilies aren't the treasure. They're pointing beyond themselves. Every form in the course is a finger pointing. Detective Boy never mistakes the finger for what it's pointing toward. Sacrifice is the root. This may be the biggest insight from the second reading. Jesus doesn't say suffering creates sacrifice. He says, the thought of sacrifice gives rise to every form suffering appears to take. Everything else grows out of that one premise. If someone must lose for another to gain, fear follows. Competition follows. Grief follows. Scarcity follows. Death follows. They're all branches. Sacrifice is the root. Sanity asks one ordinary question. Sacrifice announces, someone has to lose. Sanity asks, why? The whole structure collapses, because sacrifice only survives if scarcity is assumed. Love has no scarcity. Truth has no scarcity. God has no scarcity. The oven never stops baking. When the supply is infinite, sacrifice has no job. The endless oven. This may be one of the strongest metaphors from our entire discussion. The world believes there is one cookie. Truth reveals an endless oven. That's exactly what happened with my writing. I don't wake up wondering what I'll write. I'm not protecting ideas. I'm seeing ideas everywhere. Because I'm drawing from what feels inexhaustible. That's the opposite of sacrifice. The writer who believes there is one cookie guards it. The writer who sees the oven gives freely. Not because he's generous, because he isn't afraid. Invulnerability exposes sacrifice. This was another beautiful connection. If sacrifice were true, invulnerability couldn't be. If something real can be lost, then God's creation is vulnerable. The Course has already ruled that out, which means sacrifice cannot describe reality. It can only describe a mistaken thought. The lilies. The lilies aren't important as flowers. They're important because Jesus chose them. Detective Boy asks, why lilies? Not to become fascinated with flowers, but to discover what the lilies point toward. Purity, innocence, provision, trust, resurrection. Not as historical symbols, as reminders that what God creates cannot be diminished. The lilies aren't the meaning. They're pointing toward the meaning. Seeing before extending. Near the end, the order becomes unmistakable. You don't extend in order to make something true. You extend what you've recognized. You see? Then you naturally extend. Just as light shines because it is light, not because it decided to illuminate. The final collapse. The lesson starts with a giver and a receiver. Then it removes loss. Then it removes value from form. Then it removes sacrifice. Then it removes separation. Then it removes fear. Until finally, only one remains. One Father. One Creator. One thought. One Son. At that point, there is no transaction anymore. No competition, no scarcity, no sacrifice. Only extension.